What's with the desert? The Torah was given in the desert. The fourth book of the Chumash is called Bamidbar, in the desert. What's with the desert? Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch says, very interesting idea. He says the purpose of the desert is to teach us that the Torah applies anywhere, not in any specific city, civilization, time, or place. The desert is type of like a place which is, it's empty of stuff. It doesn't have, it's a non-environment in that sense. And consequently, it teaches us that Torah is eternal anywhere. And here we are in Queens. I am in Queens. But wherever you are in the United States, certainly in New York, right, we have to understand the Torah applies and the Torah is relevant to every single Jew in every single place. And Heinrich Heine, German poet, born Jewish, unfortunately, tragically, baptized as a Christian. But Heinrich Heine had a very interesting insight, and he said, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I think it's right, Heinrich Heine, but my German is a little rusty. He said, the Bible, he says, the Torah is the portable Jewish homeland. Portable Jewish homeland. Because wherever a Jew is, that Jew is supposed to be living in what's called Torah. Now, there are literally thousands of Jewish children who are not in their homeland. They might be living near Jewish communities. They might be living in a place where there's a lot of Jewish schools, but they're not in Jewish schools. They're in non-Jewish schools, they're in public schools, etc., etc. That means they're not home. And they're not home, that's a terrible thing. Because if you're not home, you'll be a stranger to your heritage, you'll be a stranger to the Jewish people, and you will not be able to contribute to the destiny and to the growth and to the success and to the eternity of the Jewish people. So therefore, what is Chazak doing? Chazak is trying to get, and not just trying, they're succeeding in moving kids from public schools to Jewish schools. We are right now in the Yeshiva of Central Queens, place that I've spoken at many, many times. Fantastic school. You look at the kids here, I look at the kids, when I come on a voluntary program that the kids come to on Sunday morning. Seriously, I would never have shown up any time to anything outside of normal school hours. But these kids show up on a Sunday morning to learn Torah, and they look happy, because they are happy. It's an incredible thing. When you are home, you're happy. Robert Frost, another poet, not Jewish, but Robert Frost said, home is a place where wherever you want to go, they'll accept you. Whenever you want to go there, they'll accept you. That's what we call home. So Jewish schools, that's home. Because whenever you want to go, they'll accept you. And that's what Chazak is working on so incredibly successfully. And you can be part of this incredible, incredible program. So, bringing Jews back home. By back home, I mean back to the land of Torah, ideally Israel. But if you're in Queens, at least to a Jewish school. And that is really what we're trying to work on. The Jewish people, and soon we're going to be celebrating Sinai. We're going to be celebrating the Kabbalat Torah, the acceptance of the Torah at Mount Sinai, the greatest event in world history, theophany, God speaking to an entire people. Now, the Torah tells us that it's actually prohibited to forget Mount Sinai. Pen tishkach et dvarim asher ra'u einecha, lest you forget the things that you saw with your own eyes. Pen yasuru milvavecha, and it will deviate from your heart. Kol yomei chayecha, all the days of your life. Yom asher amarat lefnei Hashem lakecha b'chor, the day you stood in front of God at Mount Sinai. So that's a mitzvah. It's actually, according to some, a mitzvah asay, positive commandment, and probably two negative commandments. Don't forget Mount Sinai. And the Ramban Nachmanides, he says, he uses an expression which is a very interesting expression. He says, Yihyu eineinu v'libeinu sham kol hayamim. Our eyes and our hearts should be there all the time. Meaning, whenever a Jew walks around, our eyes and hearts are connected to Mount Sinai. You know, it's interesting, and we look at the world through the prism, the lens of Mount Sinai. Very interesting. You know, when we say Shema, we cover our eyes. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, right? Why do we cover our eyes when we say Shema? So my teacher, Rav Moshe Shapiro, said the following, and this is really the best and most beautiful explanation I've ever heard for this. He says this: you cover your eyes because when you say Shema and you accept the oneness of God, he says you're reconnecting to Mount Sinai. And a person who's connected to Mount Sinai and to God doesn't see the world in the same way anymore. So you cover your eyes, we say Shema, connect to Mount Sinai, connect to Hashem. We take off the covering from our eyes. We're seeing the world in a different way. We don't see the world through the eyes of anything else but Torah. That's an amazing thing. So what if you've got a Jewish child? They've never covered their eyes. And they've never uncovered their eyes. They're seeing the world through the lens of the R&B music, lens of rap, through the lens of MTV, through the lens of the Academy Awards, through the lens of cameras in Hollywood, etc. That's a very distorted way of seeing the world. I mean, I feel sad for anyone whose view of the world is through the lens of all the general media. And what we want is that the children should see the world through the lens of Judaism, through the lens of Torah. When they take they say Shema and they take their hands off their eyes, they're seeing the world. And it's never too late for a child to learn Torah. You know, it's interesting. I'm just rambling here because I'm live, right? So 1391, there were riots in the north of Spain. Riots in Spain. Jews were attacked by Christian mobs. Many Jews were killed. Thousands of Jews converted to Christianity. Tens of thousands converted to Christianity. Now, of those who converted to Christianity, quite a few of them were what we call anusim, crypto-Jews, hidden Jews. They kept Judaism secretly, but they were Christians openly. They're usually known as Marranos, but that's a derogatory term which I prefer not to use. These crypto-Jews were trying to convey to their children that they're Jewish. But they were living for hundreds of years under a very, very totalitarian, strict Christian regime, Inquisition, etc., etc. It was not easy. That's an understatement. So it's interesting. When did they tell the children they were Jewish? This is a problem which is raised by a number of historians, Ben Zion Netanyahu and others. Right? When did they tell the children they were Jewish? If you told a child you were really Jewish when they were too young, they'd blurt it out on the playground and you'd be arrested. If you waited till they were too old, they'd turn you in to the Inquisition because there'd already be sincere Christians. Is that unbelievable? So you tell the kid too young, you can't tell them they're Jewish yet. So you tell them when they're too old, they're going to turn you in to the police, right? Because you're a secret Jew. So usually I think the age was around 12, 13. But one of the things, there's a few things we see from this. Number one is even though the child was 12 or 13 when you told them, this nevertheless, the cheering you are hearing in the background is nothing to do with my speech here, unfortunately. The cheering is actually, but it's actually good because it means we're getting some donations, which is actually what the purpose of this event is. Okay. But anyway, carrying on here, the children, right, even though they're only 12 and 13, and the first time they're hearing that they're actually Jews is when they're 12 or 13, guess what? These children were able to carry on the spark of Judaism to the next generation. That's unbelievable. That's miraculous. But if you wait too long, if these Inquisition families waited too long, those children would be lost because they themselves would be such sincere Christians by that time because of whatever they're receiving in their schools. They'd turn you into the Inquisition. Happened later on in history under the communists in Russia. Remember that communists in Russia? That was the Democrat, Anyway, so there was a section of the Communist Party known as the Yevsektia, which was the Jewish section of the Communist Party. And it was not, unfortunately, uncommon for kids who were raised by their parents, but they were committed communists. They were loyal to the Soviet Socialist Republic. And there were sometimes people who'd turn their parents in for engaging in Judaism, Zionism, etc., etc. Tragic. We have an opportunity for kids. Thank God, we're not living under a communist regime. Thank God we are not living under an inquisition. We have freedom of religion here in the United States. We have freedom of speech in the United States. We have freedom of education. It's an unbelievable thing that historically is unusual, very unusual. And what we need to do is to ensure that the kids, right, even if they're young, they find out they're Jewish because it's never too late. But sometimes it can make things really difficult if you wait too long. So what Chazak is doing is we're trying to give these children an unbelievable opportunity to learn about themselves, to learn about Jewish heritage, to learn about their soul, etc. It's interesting. One of the things we try to do, I mentioned before, is reconnect to Mount Sinai. I just want to tell you something interesting because again, this is unprepared, so I'm just like talking. So, but a lot of the Rishonim, that's the early medieval scholars, Jewish scholars, Rav Simcha of Vitry, who was from the Beit Midrash of Rashi, lived in France in the 12th century, and others, Shibbolei Aleket, and other of the great scholars, they say, you know what, Melamdim et hatinakot lehit no'ea b'shat halimud. They say this: we teach children to sway when they're studying Torah. Interesting. This goes back 13th century, 12th century. There's even earlier historical evidence of the Jews doing it even earlier than that. There's a Zohar in Parshat Pinchas, and Lahavdil, there's actually a Muslim source in which they have Muhammad telling the Muslims not to sway, not when they're saying Quran, because it's a Jewish custom. We don't want to imitate the Jews. It's like unbelievable. Anyway, so why do we do this? So the Rishonim say to imitate Mount Sinai, because it says Vayanu'u ha'am vayamdu merachok. The people swayed and they stood far away. They swayed in fear at Mount Sinai. He says, so we are trying to convey to the children not just information, not just facts, but also an experience. We want to convey not just the content of the revelation at Mount Sinai, but we also want to convey the experience of the revelation at Mount Sinai. And one of the ways we do that is the shockling, is the swaying back and forth. Now, you don't have to do this, it's a custom. But this custom does tell us something absolutely beautiful about the way we are transmitted. It's really what the Ramban, Nachmanides, is saying, which is, Einenu, our eyes, V'libeinu, and our hearts are there always. So even to the extent that when little kids learn, they're almost like they're at Mount Sinai. And it's an amazing thing to see. And not only that, we teach Torah, and this is something you see in many schools. There is joy. There's a simcha. It's not just another subject. It's we're happy when we teach it. We're happy when we learn it. It's like an amazing thing, you know. And also, you know, the Jewish soul. When the Jewish soul encounters Torah, it's encountering something which deep down is familiar. We have a tradition that the soul, before it comes into this world, the soul actually has already innately within it the knowledge of Torah. It forgets it. And it's only put onto a lower level of consciousness, deep layer. When we come into this world, the soul is not learning something new when it learns Torah. It's reacquainting itself with something that in the back of its mind, deep down, we know it. And there's a familiarity. I've had this experience because I often teach Jews who had no Jewish education whatsoever. They were not fortunate enough to live in an area where Chazak exists, and so they were in public school. They don't know. They didn't know anything about Judaism. But, you know, it was fascinating. This is when I was teaching at Or Sameach, and now that I'm teaching also in Yeshiva University, we have a program for students who are not religious, don't have much of a background in Judaism. One of the things I find is that sometimes I teach an idea, and a student will nod. It's like, oh yeah, it's like I heard that before. They never heard it before. They never heard it consciously before, but yeah, it's deep there, down in the soul. It's type of like, I'm not so familiar with the physics of this, but you know, you have a tuning fork, or you have a violin or something like that, you know, and you knock it like that so that it vibrates. Then you hold it near another tuning fork, it'll start vibrating at the same frequency. Sympathetic vibration, I think, is the term. Right? My car does this sometimes when I'm next to a truck. Right? Sympathetic vibration. Right? So the idea behind that is that you know, if they're both tuned to the same frequency or note, etc., it'll pick it up. The Jewish soul is like a tuning fork tuned to the same frequency as the Torah. And when the Torah starts humming and we start teaching the Torah and it vibrates, so the Jewish soul will do the same thing. It'll vibrate at the same frequency of Torah, 613 megahertz. That's what it will start doing. It will start vibrating at that same frequency. It's an amazing and a beautiful thing to see. Children who have moved from public school to the Jewish schools, Right? They're learning something which you'd imagine would be completely unfamiliar, but it's not. It is familiar. Deep down, it's familiar. It's the neshama, the soul, learning deep down what it already knows to be so, what it already knows to be true. Now, it's interesting. Talmud Torah also, fascinating. You know, there's, throughout Jewish history, we have had many of our sages have tried to figure out what the actual count of the mitzvahs is. We have a tradition that it's 613 commandments, although there's Nachmanides who says that's not a complete universally accepted tradition, but, 613 commandments. But you see, the Torah doesn't have a list of these commandments. The Torah just says, it just says do this, don't do that, etc. Lest you do this, so on and so forth. So what's the list? So there's an entire science in the Torah, in Judaism, of figuring out what's the list. There's the Sefer Charedim, there's the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvot, there's the Baal Halachot Gedolot, there's the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, the Sefer Achinu, etc. So the Rambam has a very interesting, and usually that's considered to be one of the most authoritative lists, right? They're cheering for this. Another donation came in. Thank you, whoever that was. So this list, it's interesting. The Rambam disagrees with other people. There are those who say that there's 3 separate commandments in the mitzvah of Torah study. There's a mitzvah to learn Torah, there's a mitzvah to teach it to your children, and there's a mitzvah to teach it to anyone. 3 separate mitzvot. However, Maimonides, the Rambam, he only has 1 mitzvah. And that includes all of that. Why? So, without going into too many details, because there are a lot of deductions you could make from the text of Maimonides and a lot of implications in the text that support this thesis. But I heard from my teacher, Moshe Shapiro, that the explanation is the following. Maimonides believes that there's really only 1 mitzvah. You know what that is? Taking Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and moving it forward. Taking the whole mountain, moving it forward. Right? And that involves teaching your children, learning Torah yourself, teaching other people's children, right? Helping other people teach other people's children. All that's involved because that's what the job of the Jews is. Take Sinai, the whole mountain, and move the mountain forward. So we are carrying the mountain. Something like reminded Malcolm X, famous black leader in the United States in the 60s. He once said, my ancestors didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on my ancestors. So, we say a similar thing. The Sinai landed on our ancestors, but it was willing. The Jews said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we're happy to do this, we want to do this. So, and so Hashem put Sinai on us, and he said, okay, you can take this mountain, carry it through history. That's what we've done. We've carried it through every period of Jewish history. When we were in Israel, First Temple, Second Temple, Babylon, right, Purim, the Hanukkah story. We're carrying Sinai. We carried it in Spain, we carried it in Portugal, we carried it in Lithuania, in Bukharia, in Georgia, not Alabama, but it's right. We carried it throughout history, and we keep carrying that mountain, right? And every Jew is obligated to help carry the mountain. So that means you've got a kid in school, you don't have a kid in school, you have kids, you don't have kids, right? Your kids are already grandparents, maybe, whatever it is. Every Jew is obligated to help support the idea of carrying Sinai throughout history. So that's why, for example, the Gemara says that there are laws that govern what you can build in certain streets. That's why you have zoning laws, like you have in most places in the world. You have zoning laws. Someone wants to set up in my street a quarry, a mill, a bar, whatever, then I am allowed to voice objections to that, and actually I might be able to prevent them from setting up certain businesses in my quiet residential street. Interestingly, if someone wants to set up a Torah school where they're teaching Torah, I can't object. Why not? I say, I don't have kids in the school. Right? My kids never went to that school. They went to a different school, right? Or whatever, right? Why can't I object? The answer is because I too am obligated to support that school. Because I am part of the Jewish people, and I have an obligation to move Mount Sinai forward. If the way to do that is by allowing the school to be on my street, so be it. If the way to do that is by picking up the phone, donating to Chazak, so be it. If the way to do that is by sending my child to the school, so be it. There's many ways of fulfilling this particular mitzvah which is the one mitzvah of move Sinai forward, carry the mountain. That's what we're really doing here. And it's a pleasure and a privilege and an honor and a zechut to be actually part of this tremendous effort. I do speak for Chazak occasionally, not as often as I'd like, but I teach for Chazak occasionally, and but that's a minor part of it, right? The programs in which we give a lecture, did one in Queens on Lag BaOmer, I do occasional ones in Mons, whatever. But I think the main focus, and this is like one of the most important things Chazak does, is getting these kids into Jewish schools, which is unbelievable, because the impact that has on their future, the impact that has on their social network, the impact that has on their awareness, the impact that has on the Jewish people as a whole, because we are producing Jewish leaders, responsible Jews who contribute to the Jewish people. It's an amazing, amazing thing. We learned in last week's Torah portion, it said, the Torah doesn't say this explicitly, but our sages learned this from what the Torah says, which is Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh. Every Jew is responsible, one for the other. We're a guarantor, one for the other. What is a guarantor? Very simply, a guarantor is someone who says, if you can't pay the loan, I'll pay it. Right? You have a guarantor on your mortgage, maybe, something like that. It's a guarantor. Every Jew is a guarantor, arev, one for the other. The Ritva, Rabbi Yontov ben Alishbili, one of the great medieval sages, learnt from Spain, learnt in the yeshiva of the Rashba, Barcelona. The Ritva says, Ki kol Yisrael keguf echad heim. All the Jews are like one body. So, you know what I mean? My right hand's responsible for the left hand as well. It's not like I say, oh, big deal, my left hand is there. No, get it away from the moving machine. We're all part of the same body. That's why, for instance, it's a very interesting halacha, which the Mishnah Berurah cites the Ritva in explaining this halacha, which is that if I said Kiddush, or I said a bracha on a mitzvah, but there's another Jew who didn't yet say the bracha, and they need me to say that bracha, I'm allowed to say it again. Even though normally you're not allowed to say a bracha once you've fulfilled a mitzvah, but the Mishnah Berurah, Chafetz Chaim, explains, I haven't fulfilled the mitzvah because I includes him. And since I includes him and he hasn't done it, I cannot say, hey, I've done the mitzvah. No, I haven't. Because this guy still needs me to say Kiddush. Right? In the same way, I cannot say, I have fulfilled the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. I have fulfilled the mitzvah of teaching my children. I haven't. Because there's a little piece of me, i.e. this other Jew, who's not learning Torah. And there's another Jew who needs me to get him into school. And there's another Jew who needs me to help teach, and so on and so forth. That means I have not fulfilled the mitzvah yet. Because part of me is this, in the immortal words of the great, this is my third poet this morning, I don't know why but John Donne, the great English poet, John Donne put it so beautifully. He said, no man is an island entirely of itself. Every man is a part of the continent, a piece of the main. And that's what we say, the same idea. No Jew is an island entirely of himself or herself. Everyone's a part of the continent, piece of the main. We're all part of that main. We're all part of that group, as the Ritva says, Kol Yisrael keguf echad heim. I'm taking issue here with another set of Jewish poets and songwriters, Simon and Garfunkel, who said, I am a rock, I am an island. No, you're not. No, you're not an island, you're a part of the continent. I'm afraid I have to agree with John Donne over my Jewish compatriots, Simon and Garfunkel. I hope they're moichel me for this. But nevertheless, right, in this particular case, he's Catholic, he's English, there's two strokes against him, but he's right. Right, he is totally right here, right, and that is every Jew is responsible one for the other, and what that means is I have to, aside from the purely halachic aspect of Talmud Torah, it's also part of this idea, right, of helping. So anyway, any questions? Oh, you can't ask questions. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, all right. I think I'm going to stop now. I've had a great time here at Chazak in Queens, Yeshiva of Central Queens. As I said, spoken here a bunch of times, love the place, and spoken for Chazak, great organization, and really the sending Jewish kids to Jewish schools. I mean, what could be a more obvious solution? Now, people are always wondering about Jewish continuity, right? So you have a JCC, I know, we'll build a $3 million gym, that'll do it. Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Go to the gym and work out with everyone who's at the gym. I'm being sarcastic. That's not going to help Jewish continuity that much, right? Oh, I know. We have an idea. Let's put on Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway in Yiddish. That should help Jewish continuity. No, right? These things don't really help that much. They're fascinating. I happen to like, Fiddler on the Roof and great play and working out in the gym, as you can see, work out heavily, right? But there's no need to laugh there in the background, thank you, right? But if you really want to help Jewish continuity, the most obvious, tried, true, statistically proven method is get the kid to a Jewish school, right? That's where it's going to be. And there's so many reasons for it. Well, first of all, if you learn about Judaism, right, more knowledgeable you are, better Jew you'll be, right? Also, we tend to date, hang out with, chill with, get engaged to, and marry our social group. So if the kid's in a Jewish social group, you've increased the chance, the probability, just by nothing magical about this. It's not a segula, right? This is just simple logic, right? If you're hanging out with Jewish kids, and they're your friends, you're likely to marry one. It's also there in terms of intermarriage. So they'll pick up some Jewish pride. They'll pick up some pride in who we are, etc. Unbelievable thing. So that's the message here. Take Mount Sinai, move it forward. Right, drop the mountain on these kids. I mean, metaphorically, obviously, right? But all part of that. We're all part of that. Eneinu v'lebeinu sham kol hayamim. Our eyes, our hearts should be there all the time. If your eyes and hearts are on Mount Sinai, if that's the prize, if that's the goal, if that's what you're looking at, this is the way to do it, right? As the Rambam would say, it's not just teaching, it's not just learning, it's not just teaching your children, it's not just teaching other people's children. It is also getting children, everyone, to learn Torah. That's a little bit of the idea. This is Mordechai Becher speaking for Chazak at the live event here at Yeshiva Central Queens. And thanks for watching.